Imagine you're a detective, and the case file in front of you says this. Suspect has been active for at least 12,000 years, possibly much longer. Motive unknown, present on every continent, never once caught in the act of starting. The suspect isn't a person, it's smoking. And today we're building the case, piece by piece, exhibit by exhibit. Exhibit A, the alibi that doesn't hold up. The popular story goes, tobacco, Native Americans, Columbus, Europe, cigarettes, done. A neat little timeline. Except that timeline only covers about 500 years. Humans have been sitting near fire for closer to 1 million. So before we can talk about who started smoking, we have to ask a dumber, more basic question. Who started fire? Answer: Homo erectus, at a site called Wonderwork Cave in South Africa, roughly 1 million years ago. Burnt bone, burnt plant ash, inside a cave. Not wildfire debris, but a fire someone tended. That's not us, technically. That's an earlier, smaller-brained cousin of ours. And every descendant of that firekeeper, including every ancestor of every human alive today, grew up breathing smoke as a daily, unavoidable fact of life. So step 1 of the case. Smoke inhalation isn't a modern habit. It's closer to a species-wide inheritance. Exhibit B, the motive. Here's where it gets strange. A campfire in a forest doesn't just burn wood. It burns whatever's nearby. And across ancient Africa, Asia, and Europe, that occasionally meant wild cannabis relatives, wild tobacco relatives, and other plants carrying alkaloids that do measurable things to a nervous system. Now here's the twist that makes this more than coincidence. Humans already had the hardware to respond. The endocannabinoid system, receptors that regulate mood, appetite, memory, was fully in place long before anyone burned cannabis on purpose. It didn't evolve for cannabis smoke, but when that smoke showed up, the brain already knew what to do with it. Run that scenario across hundreds of thousands of campfires over hundreds of thousands of years, and eventually somebody notices the pattern. That plant, that smell, that feeling. And noticing a pattern is the first step toward repeating it on purpose. Exhibit C, what actually survived. A good detective distinguishes between no evidence and evidence destroyed. Dried leaves and seeds rot. Wood rots. A pipe made of hide is gone in a couple of centuries. Stone survives for millions of years because stone doesn't care. So when archaeology says the oldest confirmed evidence is a certain age, read that as the oldest evidence that happened to survive. Here's the current physical record. A Central Asian burial, around 500 BC in the Pamir Mountains. Wooden braziers, fire-scorched stones, and residue from high-potency cannabis. Not fiber-grade hemp, but plants apparently grown specifically to be burned and inhaled, buried with the dead on purpose. The Scythians, described by the historian Herodotus in the 5th century BC. Sealed tents, glowing stones, hemp seed thrown on top, people howling with pleasure from the smoke. Dismissed as exaggeration for centuries, until Scythian burial mounds turned up bronze braziers and hemp residue in exactly the arrangement he described. Utah's Great Salt Lake Desert, about 12,000 years old. A hearth containing wild tobacco seeds, concentrated in a way that suggests deliberate use. Thousands of years before any pipe shows up in that region. 12,000 years. That's before farming, before pottery, before almost every civilization you've ever studied. Exhibit D, the sacred use versus the casual use. Tobacco itself, the plant genus Nicotiana, only exists natively in the Americas. Nobody in Europe, Africa, or Asia had ever seen it before 1492, when Columbus's crew watched islanders inhale smoke from rolled, burning leaves and were baffled enough to try it themselves within weeks. But American tobacco use goes back much further. Residue in pipes from the southeastern United States dates back at least 3,500 years, with some researchers arguing for a much older origin tied to Amazonian cultivation. And critically, it wasn't casual. In most of the cultures that originated it, tobacco sealed agreements,
opened contact with the spirit world, carried prayer. A shaman lighting tobacco was performing a ritual, not taking a smoke break. The idea of smoking as background filler, something you do standing at a bus stop, is a European habit, invented centuries after the plant itself.
Psychopharmacologist Ronald Siegel argued in the 1980s that seeking altered states of consciousness might be a basic drive, sitting alongside hunger, thirst, and reproduction, found across the animal kingdom, not just in humans. The supporting cases are bizarre. Elephants deliberately seeking fermented fruit, Siberian reindeer eating psychoactive mushrooms, then other reindeer drinking their urine because the active compounds pass through mostly intact. If that drive runs that deep across species, it's not a stretch to think early humans were seeking out psychoactive smoke long before agriculture, long before pottery, purely through trial, error, and memory. And trial and error with unfamiliar burning plants has a body count. Some smoke feels incredible, some stops your heart. That knowledge was earned the hard way and passed down the only way available for most of human history, spoken, around a fire, generation after generation, long before any of it was written down. Long before ritual or recreation, smoke may have been treatment. Egypt's Ebers Papyrus, from around 1550 BC, prescribes inhaling smoke from heated herbs for lung and throat conditions. Hippocrates wrote about inhaling herbal vapor for disease. Indian Ayurveda describes dhumapana, literally smoke drinking, a detailed, centuries-old system of inhaling specific herbs for specific ailments. This wasn't guesswork dressed up as tradition. It persisted because it worked often enough, in a world with no antibiotics and no surgery. We still deliver medicine through the lungs today, inhalers, nebulizers. Only the burning part got phased out. Here's the uncomfortable turn in the case. Tobacco reached Europe in the 1500s and, stripped of the ritual restraint that had contained it for millennia, exploded. Snuff among aristocrats by the 1700s. Cigars everywhere by the 1800s. The mass-produced cigarette by the early 1900s. Something that took indigenous cultures thousands of years to fold into careful, meaningful ritual became, in about 4 centuries, an industrial product. And in the 20th century, manufacturers buried their own scientists' cancer research, marketed to teenagers, and engineered cigarettes to hit harder and faster. Same smoke, almost nothing else in common with where it started. So who really started smoking? There's no name, no date, no single moment we can point to. The physical trail holds firm to about 12,000 years and stretches further, with good reason to think it's older still. Possibly as old as the first fires our ancestors ever learned to keep burning through the night. What we can say for certain, long before anyone wrote a word of history, some humans sat near a fire, noticed that a certain kind of smoke made them feel different, and decided that was worth doing again. That single observation, cause, effect, repeat, might be one of the oldest thoughts our species ever had. Case, officially, still open.